Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. Hope you're having a good weekend. Mine's been pretty uneventful, other than eating. I like to eat now. I like to eat everything. I'm on this medication. I know I've told you guys I'm on this medication that just makes me want to eat. But anyway, tonight, let me give a little story to this. Last night I was talking to a guy, another podcaster, and we got talking about the Apollo missions and landing on the moon, and it got me really thinking about, like, I wanted to have a little discussion about that. So let's just jump right into it. My opinion, personal opinion, is that I think there were like 16 or 17 Apollo missions. I think they ultimately landed, and I think like they went there. Now, was it all like real footage, or all like some of the stuff, was it embellished? I'm sure it was. You tell me one thing that the government's involved in that they don't like embellish it. Like, when I've had conversations with people about the Apollo missions and landing on the moon, and they act like, no, the government, and it's like, we know they screw stuff up all the time, but at the end, I think that they did put boots on the moon. And, I have reasons behind all that, things I've heard, things I've read, and we'll try to, I'll try to go through them. I'll try to go over that stuff. I heard that, I guess, like, I read, I can't say I heard, but that like humanity is going to be going back in 2026 to 2028. They're going to try real hard to go back there, which, that'll prove a lot of points. So first off, I had to do a little bit of, like, I guess, research, reading, particularly on, excuse me, on the Van Allen belt, which is a couple layers of like radiation that a lot of people say, oh, humans can't survive it. And I guess what I would say is like, from everything that I read, which, we could all be like, oh, it's lies. If you read it on the internet, it's lies. And, so truth is I don't think, especially nowadays, I don't think anybody knows whether it's all true or all lies or however it goes. But there's a lot of things to break down. And if you start breaking them down one at a time, to me, in my opinion, things start to make sense. So first off, the Van Allen belt. Can humans even get through it? And the answer, I believe, is yes. You can't just plow through it. They had to figure out which was the best way, the least exposed way. It wasn't just straight through. They had to kind of go through it and navigate through it, which, all the smart people in the world were trying to figure it out. So, and I think they were able to figure it out. So I don't think it's like, if you just look at it from the surface, like, you can't go up there naked and swim through the Van Allen belts. You're probably going to end up with a lot of radiation burns or sickness or whatever. But if it's limited, which I believe it was, they did have some shielding on their ship, their spaceship, the Apollo landers, whatever you want to call them. And they were, I read that the hull of that thing was made of aluminum, and it was like 2 to 3 centimeters thick. So, that's got a little bit to it. And it's not just a skin. It's not like a pop can. It was actually thicker than that. And, they knew they were going to get into some radiation. So I think protected themselves. And then I was reading where, and I don't know how this works, so I'm not, one of the smart people in the world, but I did read where there were devices on board that helped shield that. So, like, are there electronic devices that can repel that type of radiation? I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing. But that's kind of how I took it. There were devices that were that were on board that helped them shield that stuff, which that makes sense to me because, like, I don't know if frequency does it, or like I said, I'm not one of the smart people in the world, but I think that it's a possibility, for sure, a possibility, at least in my mind. So throughout the thought process, I've been able to get over that. So yeah, I think humans could get through the Van Allen belt because of the radiation. I think if they did it smart, if they traversed through it, just like if you were going to go cross a river, you wouldn't pick the deepest, most violent place to go through. You would look for a place that was shallow and that you could navigate reasonably. So I think that's what they did. So I'm buying that story. So then, one of the next hurdles that I had in my mind had to get over was like what kind of hardware, what kind of ship, if you call it a ship, what kind of aircraft, were they using, and did they have the technology to do it? And I think given the Cold War era, given like the space race where major powers were trying to do it, I think, and I think it was Project Paperclip, something like that, one of these top secret government things that have come out. I think I've run over my hose. Don't want to do that. So anyway, I think that they did have the ability to do that. The story is I think there were 17 missions, so they had a lot of time, and I think like missions, 3 through 7, or there were a few in the middle that they were unmanned. They were testing out. They were testing the boundaries, and the SpaceX does that now. Like they'll intentionally run one of their rockets to like above its maximum to see how it'll perform and see where it's gonna fail, and when it's gonna fail. And I'm guessing when you test stuff like that, you certainly have to know. You can't just like work it all out on paper and put people in it, light the fuse. I think there's a lot of work that goes into that, and I think they did that. So all together there were like 16 or 17 missions. They weren't all manned, and they didn't just go there once. There were several lunar landings. At least that's the way I interpreted it. So, and that would be, I guess, a convenient part of the story, that if there's multiples, then were they just showing you video footage, because that's what everybody looks at, is like, it's all fake. But if they're showing you like different landings from different times and then dressing it up as it was the same one, which I don't know why they would do that, but I don't know why the government does a lot of things they do. I could see it. I could see, like, I heard one time where like, what'd they do? Leave a cameraman on the moon, and when the ship took off, it just left him there, or when they were landing, and I've heard stories that like, I can get over it, for one, I'm not holding the camera's up there, it's taking a picture of me, I can get up and I can walk off, and I didn't leave anybody standing here. Secondly, when the lander was coming in, I read, and I kind of believe this, I read where that was a previous mission that left the camera there, and it was already there from the previous mission. So once again, it kind of makes sense. I don't know the details. I'm not the expert, but like I say, I can get over that stuff. Do I want to believe it? I don't care. It doesn't. It literally doesn't weigh one way or the other on me. But to me, it's a reasonable thing that could happen. I know there was a big deal about it, and why didn't we go back? That was another that was another big thing. I was going to wait till later on to talk about this, but I'll talk about it now and maybe touch on it a little bit later. But so why haven't we, I think 71 or 72 was the last Apollo mission. I could be wrong. It was right around in there. And so why haven't we been back, in the last 50 years? And it was just like, the reason is for what? They went there, they spent some time there, they did what they needed to do there. As far as I know, they still, you can go out and look at the moon, it's still there. But you only got to go there for so much. There's no atmosphere, so it's not like you're trying to put somebody there, no more than you would try to establish a base on the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It's like humans have gotten there, but then they don't go there every weekend. So it was put to me, and I don't know, I think I seen it on a Rogan podcast where it was put to me like the Concorde supersonic jets. I think there were 2 of them they had, and they would fly from like London to New York in like an hour. I mean, something ridiculous. And it was supersonic flight. They were expensive, but hey, you could make the trip. And I remember seeing pictures of it. And I think when I was alive, after I was born, I can remember pictures of it. It was the long, slender jet that had like the nose on it was slanted, and then they could point it up. And like when it landed, it was like down like this, but when they were flying it, it was up. And it was a long, slender. I don't think it had like wings. It had like swept wings on it. And they used those for a while, but then they realized like it's just too expensive and costs too much money to fly it. And all they're doing is saving, time. And so they were basically, those things were just scrapped. And that was that. We don't fly subsonic jets anymore. The whole point on that story is like, just because we don't go to the moon every weekend doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's like we don't fly subsonic at all anymore commercially. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just proved to be not real, like, I guess, fruitful. And I read, I think it was like $4 billion per mission. The per Apollo mission was the average was $4 billion. And, in the mid to late 60s, that's like a crazy amount of money, even for the government to be blowing through it. That's like a lot of money. So to me, that it all starts kind of making a little bit of sense. They got up there, they harvested some moon rocks and some, moon dust. And then, how many times can they go up there and jump around, play golf, that sort of thing. So I'm slowly trying to like start to work through these things that are troublesome, as far as like, did we land on the moon, or when I say we, did Americans land on the moon, or did Americans not land on the moon? And that's where I start leaning towards like, yeah, we did. I mean, as a country, we did. And another thing was like, and these are things that I've heard people talk about, and so I've kind of like soaked on it, is it would be, I think, and just for the sake of the discussion, I think it would be easier to get to the moon than it would be to tell the lie that we got there. And I say it like that because you have to factor in, like all the engineers, all the scientists, all the people that worked at Houston, all the people that built the hardware, the people that assembled the hardware, the people that everybody. I'm sure there were tens of thousands of people, if not more, that worked on those missions, or at least in support of those missions, that you'd have to pull the wool over their eyes. You'd have to pull the wool over their eyes, because here we are, 50 some years later, and there's a handful of people that are like, it was faked. But you're talking about, like, say, I don't know, say 100,000 people, and you get 5 people that say that it wasn't real, that I worked for NASA, or I was at Houston, and it really didn't happen that way. But everybody else says that it did. So, like, you can't have a whole room full of people say one thing and then have one person say something different and focus all of your attention and all your beliefs on that one person. So the lie would have to be huge, and you would have to be like, you'd have to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and then keep it there all these years later. And I just think that's like a huge feat. How you doing, Terry? Glad to see you here, buddy. Well. I hear the Family Guy say that. Every time I read that, I hear the Family Guy say that. But yeah, I'm just sitting here talking about the Apollo missions and the moon landing, and I guess I'm trying to run through the details on why I believe the Apollo missions were successful. So where I was getting at was like the lie would have to be bigger than actually going to the moon, in my opinion. You'd have to just everybody you'd have to pull the wool over their eyes. So I heard one guy say like, well, it's a mind control operation, and that just kind of goes off the rails for me. I know that stuff happens, but like, you can throw that sort of stuff in there on anything and say it's not true. I see down here you wrote question. To me, yeah, a lot of people question that. I think we went. I think the Americans made it to the moon. Can it be disproven? Well, it's all just like, especially at this stage in the game, none of us were there. So all we can do is just absorb what we hear and what we see and what we feel, and, use your gut. And my gut says, yeah, we were there. Other people say no. And then when I ask, a lot of times when I've said, based upon what, why, how did you get to that point? And a lot of times they're just like, well, I just feel like I'm right and that we didn't land there. So I don't argue with that, because I'd rather run down the facts and that sort of thing, which is what I'm in the process of doing, one at a time, kind of taking them down. And so, like, just to recap, since you just got here, it was, I think there were 17 Apollo missions. It was $4 billion a piece, approximately. That's a lot of money in the 60s. So they were expensive. And I just kind of went through a story with the Concorde, if you remember that, supersonic commercial air flight that flew from London to New York. And it was real expensive. And it just like, they ended up scrapping them because it just wasn't real fruitful. So it was like, we did do that. Humans did master supersonic flight for commercial use. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't worth all the hubbub. So they scrapped them, and we just fly, 600, 700, 800 miles an hour now, instead of, Mach 2 or whatever it was they were flying. I don't even remember. It was a Concorde. I was young, but I know like, by today's standards, we don't do that commercially. We don't have supersonic airplanes flying around the world taking passengers, but that doesn't mean that it didn't exist in the 70s and 80s. So with that theory, just because we don't go to the moon every weekend or send people to the moon every weekend doesn't mean that it didn't happen in the 60s and 70s. So that's my point. What are some of the other reasons? There's like people that I've discussed this with, they assume well, the pictures didn't look the same, or, the flag was waving, or whatever it might be. And everybody implies like they know what it would be like on the moon if we were there. And, truthfully, I have no idea. I know it'd be way different there than it is here. So when I take a picture, it'd be safe to say that the picture would look not normal to what I'm used to. And I was reading on it, kind of brushing up a little bit on it before I started this. And it was like, there's no atmosphere. So our atmosphere disperses light differently. So when you get there, things look different. Shadows are black. They're not just like shaded. They're actually black. When they would stir dust up, it wouldn't create a cloud. It would just fall directly straight back down to the ground. So that would make everything different. Like that would literally make everything different. And to imply like, yeah, totally different atmosphere for sure. I agree. And so, you know, all you can do is just like run, at least what I do. I'm not going to say what you do, what anybody else does, but like I run these exercises out in my head and it's like, I don't know. So I'm pretty sold on the fact that humans, and more specifically Americans, did make it to the moon. There were lives lost. There were missions that failed. Out of the 16 or 17, I think there was like 6 or 8 that were unmanned. And, you know, like I said earlier, like SpaceX does, they, a lot of times when their rockets or aircraft, when it explodes, it's not always by accident. You know, you when you create machines like that have to be in these crazy conditions, you need to know what they're worth. You need to know where the line is that they're going to fail. So you have to push them things, man. You got to push them until they do fail. And then you have to keep track of that. And I think the Apollo missions early on, that was one thing they did. You know, I watched Elon Musk on Joe Rogan just the other day, and they talked about that. And they're like, they have to be run to failure so you understand where that failure is at. And unfortunately, it's like millions, if not billions of dollars that you just have to sacrifice for the sake of, you know, making it over the next hurdle. And all that stuff makes sense to me in my own head. I don't know if I'm putting it out there the right way, but that was my goal, was to try and, you know, put things out there that way. So it was a little bit understandable. I like talking about stuff like this and trying to work the facts out in my head. It's like, I obviously don't jog anymore. So it's like exercising my brain. And, you know, I think it's cool. There's other things I'm going to come up with that along these same lines that I just want to, I guess, talk about and work it out. I think that there's too many stories. And when I say stories, I take them as stories because I wasn't there. But there's too many things people say about how they went, astronauts, interviews, things like that. I'm not going to lie. I watched an interview. It was with 3 astronauts. I can't remember which ones they were, but they came back from a mission. And yeah, it was really weird how they conducted themselves. But I can't base everything off of like one interview. And I should probably try and look that up because it was really weird. I need to learn how to overlay videos and stuff like that so I can play what I'm like referencing to. So I've come a long way when it comes to this stuff. Well, yeah, people say that the rover is fake and that there's no way that thing was folded up and came out of that pop can. And it's just like, you know, I don't know. I haven't run the numbers. I assume most people that I've had the discussion with haven't sat down and said, this is what it's going to take. So, you know, so would the rover missions on Mars be fake too? I misunderstood that question. Yeah, I don't know. Cause one of the things like, and I mentioned this early, Terry, I mentioned like one of the big things for me to get over, one of the hurdles I had to get over to get myself, I don't want to say get myself to believe it, but I had to work things out. And one of the things I had to work out was the Van Allen belts, which are 2 radiation belts that are encompass our planet. And there's a lot of radiation. So can life get through those? And a lot of people say no. But the research I did on it is, yes, they can. But you just have to traverse it the right way. You can't just like bulldog your way through it. You have to pick the right time to go, the right direction to go, and then you can keep the radiation to a minimal, like a CAT scan. So I think I think for me, the biggest question was not were humans capable of putting hardware on the moon, or in this case, like you're talking about Mars, it's more about were people able to get there, soft tissue and bone. And so I think, it's one thing to put a rover in a spaceship and send it out. And it's another thing to put a human in a spaceship, rocket ship, whatever, and send them out. So to me, the Mars rovers were not a question. They could be faked. Hell, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's real stuff. I don't think I think humans have the ability to just kind of keep reaching out and reaching out and reaching out, and I think the Mars rovers were a real thing. Something else I've had discussions with people about too is like the pictures that we get are always rendered. They're always touched up by an artist or something. And that makes a lot of sense to me because you have to put pictures in a form that people understand. If you just go out and take a picture of the sky, most people's not going to even know what they're looking at. But you start circling little pinpoint lights and saying, that's Mars. People will understand that. And I think that's kind of the theory on, people rendering videos and rendering pictures so that people understand it. And that makes sense to me. And I'll buy it, not that I'm anybody, but, I'll buy it. So, yeah, I think like I'm like 95% sure it all happened. I'll leave the door open. So be like, hey, Eric, we duped you. We duped you. We fooled you. And I can take that. It's like I said, for me, it's a lot of it's just trying to work the bugs out in your head. And I enjoy the exercises of trying to like, if, there's no atmosphere there, like the light would be different, or, there's like everything would be different. And then, it's extremely cold there, that it's harsh conditions. But I think if you set a qualified team to work it out, and that's where compartmentalization comes in. If you just set a team out to work like, okay, you don't have a budget. We're going to give you, 1,000 people, and you guys put all your brains together and all your smarts and whatever, and come up with a suit that these men can wear. And I think that that's obtainable. I don't think it's ridiculous to think that none of that happened. And then, you can compartmentalize that all the way down to the food that they're going to eat, or any of it. And then, you have tens or hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know how many people worked on that whole mission. I guess that's something I could look at real quick. Just in general, look it up on old Chat GPT. Bear with me here a second. So I asked ChatGPT how many people worked on the Apollo missions in total. So yeah, it was roughly about 400,000 people. So just not quite 1 million people worked on that. So I'm sorry, but if you all hold hands and pat each other on the butt, you can get a lot done when you're 400,000 strong. That's what I think. So yeah, I think it could happen, and I believe it happened. And I read that in 26, I think it was 2026 to 2028, they were going to try to put boots on the ground again up there. So that'll be pretty interesting to see if that happens. I'll check it out. I'll be watching it. And if, what was his name? What was that? Stanley Kubrick, something like that. At a studio someplace where they were like, yeah, it was faked. moon landings were fake there, then imagine what they can do now with AI and CGI and stuff like that. We really have to believe we really have to believe that they're landing at, like Mars. I guess that could all be faked, but I think like when you put 400,000 people strong onto a project, I think that shit's gonna get done. I got this cool light going on. I don't know if that works out or not. I don't think it does too much. It's too bright. Got this light on my microphone that's kind of cool. I hate to have it, not use it, but it's just pretty crazy. Pretty crazy that it's too bright in the screen. But anyway, so that's my take on it. I don't think I've forgotten anything. I talked about it for 30 minutes, and ultimately, I think that it happened, and I think they slowly worked the bugs out. They lost some lives. They lost a lot of money, and there's really no need to go back, at least not to this point. You're not going to go up there and one guy was like, we haven't even explored all the oceans. How the hell are they going to go to the moon? Well, they haven't explored all the oceans because there's really no need. First off, I think it'd be safe to say that. And then secondly, like, the humans have been to a lot of places, but they don't have to cover every square inch to. I don't even know how to describe what I'm saying as far as, like, they've been to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. They've sent drones down there, and then I think there was this guy that was in like this submersible that went there. I could be wrong. I'd have to look that up, but I know he's been down really deep, and it's just like expensive. It's dangerous. There's no need to go every day. And I could apply that same principle, as far as the moon is concerned. It's like, there's no need to go there every day. So why do it? It doesn't mean that you haven't went once. And, there it is. There it is in a nutshell. There's this guy's opinion on the Apollo moon missions and landings. And, if anybody's got anything to say about it, hey, hit me up. Hit me up. Let's talk about it. I'll be glad to. I got my opinions, and more than my opinions, I expect everybody else to have their own. It's kind of cool when they match mine, but hell, I don't demand it by any stretch. That's how I learn a lot of stuff. But anyway, I've been on for 33 minutes. I've had one person in here and one person communicating, which is good. So there it is. Feeling pretty good today. These meds, like I said, and I know, Terry, you can appreciate this. These meds make me eat everything, man. I love to eat. I love food. I can't. I know I shouldn't be eating, and I eat anyway. But steroids, like I said, I'm going to be some big buff muscle-bound guy here in the next couple of weeks. Not really. I'll just be some big fat ass from eating everything that I see. But feeling pretty good overall, and I'll take it. Still got this hose. I'm going to church in the morning. I think I'm going to try to get through the service and take my hose off and sit there. Maybe the good Lord, being in church, he'll give me a little bit of a boost, so maybe I can make it through the whole service and not have my air hose on. I'm going to give that a shot. I was thought about doing it here tonight, but I talk, and when I talk, I use a lot more air, and I don't want to stress myself out doing that. So maybe in the future, not maybe, I'll do it in the future at some point. I know I will. But I know. Not only that, not only it's in your name, but we're related. So it's in the genes. It's genetically. It's on both of us. So I'm glad to hear that you had a good vacation. And you're still turning that big wheel. So be safe out there. I'm going to cut it off here. But just know, anybody that watches this video, I appreciate the subscriptions. I'm not going to hunt you down. I'm not going to send you a W-2. But I appreciate the subscriptions. If you like the video, click the thumbs up. All that stuff helps. Not that I'm trying to make money, because I'm not, but it helps. I like to grow. I like to grow the channel, not for the monetary part of it, just for gives me something to do. Like I grow an apple tree and not expect to eat the apples off of it, but I'll still grow the tree, or whatever, however you want to look at it. But anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll catch you later. See you, Terry.